Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Amy Sweezey here. Just wanted to say hello and thank you so much to the Legacy of Leesburg, the Neighbor to Neighbor Club, who invited me out to speak about hurricane preparations and preparedness a couple of weeks ago. If you missed it, I'm so sorry that I didn't get to see you in person, but we did record the session, so you'll be able to see that information. Also, just wanted to let you know, if you are interested in any of my children's weather books, which of course make great gifts for the children in your lives, you can check them out on my website, amysweezey.com. And thanks again, Legacy of Leesburg. I had a great time.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our club meeting. We've got a special guest, and I'll have Jeanette introduce her in a few minutes. And I think she may be able to order up some cool weather, so let's hope. On the table, if you're not part of Neighbor to Neighbor, there is an information piece about the club, and then also a volunteer form if you're not involved. We'd love to get you involved. Some of the needs, like our block captains and so forth. But anyway, let's get started and go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to have Jeanette come in and introduce our guest, and we really appreciate you coming out to visit us today.
That's because you were too busy letting all these old fart men have their picture with you, you young chickadee. So, as you can tell, we love Amy. Paul and I are so very proud to welcome back to the Legacy of Leesburg our favorite meteorologist, Amy Sweezey. Amy, of course, is a meteorologist, as you know, but she is most importantly a wife, a mother of 3. She's just amazing. We just had dinner with her, and we just fell in love with her again. We came from Brevard County, which is where we first met her as a meteorologist. She would have to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go be on channel. I'm not going to say the channel because I don't like them since Amy's not there anymore. But anyway, so she really had to make some big sacrifices. But anyway, Amy has delivered daily forecasts on television and spoken to countless groups of children and adults about weather. Amy is an award-winning author of books about weather, which we will have the opportunity to purchase tonight, or we will also be giving you that information because I think some of you will be very excited about these books, and not just for grandchildren, but great-grandchildren, because we're old, Amy. So, welcome back, Amy, to our Neighbor to Neighbor Club in the Legacy of Leesburg. She'll probably be busy getting her books. This is just a little something that the Neighbor to Neighbor Club put together for you. But most importantly, the Conleys, you met them, Milton and Christine. There's something special in there that Milton handmade for you, and then Christine had the other personalized, so I know you're going to love it. It doesn't matter. Whatever you want to do.
First, talk second. Oh my goodness, it's full of great stuff. It's my gift. Whoa, hold on. Oh wow, it's personalized. It's got my name on it. Okay, so these are, it looks like my grocery lists. It has a paper with lines, which is going to be my grocery list. Oh, this is neat. It says Amy Sweezey, and my name is spelled right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Not everybody gets it right. Oh, this is great. All these really cool, different shape sizes of paper. And this is what Milton made. This is a pen. Wow.
I told her all about it, Milton, how you
This
all
is
do those amazing
cool.
things.
If you haven't seen this, you have to come up and see it afterwards, okay? Oh, thank you very much. It's gorgeous. I appreciate that. All right, I'm going to sit this over here. I feel really loud. Am I really loud in this microphone, or is it just that the speaker's
No.
behind me? Can you hear
You're
okay?
good. You're good.
Not too loud? Okay. Well,
evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much to the Kellys for inviting me back. As somebody said I was here 3 years ago, I feel like it's been longer. Is it just that time goes like this fast? 5, 6, maybe 4, I don't know. It was a while ago. I was still working at WESH at that time, I'll say it. They were good to me for 18 years, so I was working at Channel 2 then. And in 2020, I left WESH. Right after the pandemic started. I was supposed to leave in April, and then I ended up extending for 1 month just because there was no way they were going to be able to bring people in to do job interviews right at the beginning when COVID was happening. So I extended for another month, and then I was like, nope, gotta go, can't extend any longer, I need to be done. So I have been a meteorologist in Central Florida for 20 years. My husband and I moved here in 2002 from the freezing cold state of Michigan, at least in the wintertime, and I've never looked back. I've always been a Midwest girl, went to college in Chicago, and was so happy to be in Florida and in the Sunshine State. So today, I know this is a safety group, and I do want to talk about hurricane season, so I won't spend a lot of time talking about me. If you were here a couple years ago, I did spend a lot of time talking about all about me, so I'm not going to do that this time. But if you do have questions, of course, I'll be happy to answer them later if there's anything you want to know. First of all, we'll talk about hurricane season, though. It did officially start, if you did or did not know, on Wednesday, June 1st, and it runs until November 30th. I put up too many things. There you go. And, of course, hurricanes can and have formed in every single month of the year, but it is during these 6 months that formation of hurricanes is the most common. And that's because there are specific conditions that come together in the Atlantic basin, which includes the ocean and the Gulf and the Caribbean, and it makes the ocean ripe for storm development. So some of those things are, that's when the warmest water happens with the sun, and the lowest wind shear, which is wind up higher in the atmosphere, which can rip storms apart and keep them from forming at other times of the year. So those two things especially, there are other things too, but those are the two big things why hurricane season for us runs June 1st through November 30th, officially. Now, my mantra when it comes to hurricane season, since I've been here, is don't be scared, just prepare. If you prepare now, ahead of time, then you don't need to panic later. And it's a much better feeling than waiting in line at Home Depot for an hour for water that's not on the shelves anymore, or whatever. Now, each year, the National Hurricane Center and under the hold on. All right, clicker. Do I have to do it some other way? Now I had it come up so many times and now it's not working. What did I do?
Oh, there it goes.
Yeah, but I hit the space bar. This is magic touch.
Dance the man.
You made it happen. Okay. All right. Voila. Fantastic. Thank you. All right, so each year the National Hurricane Center under the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration puts out a forecast for storm formation. I'm sure you've heard it on the news and you probably roll your eyes like most people. Oh, what difference does it make? They're always just typing things up. So the forecast for this year, if you are interested, from the National Hurricane Center is for a 65% chance of an above normal season, a 25% chance of a near normal season, and a 10% chance of a below normal season. So why this? We'll talk about what normal is in a second. Why is this the forecast? Why above average? There are several factors. There are a lot of things that they look at, but this is a whole list of the things that are kind of put into why there's extra storms expected this year. First, La Nina. You've probably heard of La Nina and El Nino on the news. La Nina is happening now. It's ongoing, and it is expected to persist all the way through this upcoming hurricane season. La Nina has to do with the water temperatures off the coast of South America. So the water way far away impacts the weather way over here in Florida, which seems kind of crazy, I know, but when the water off the coast of South America, the west coast, the Pacific side, is below average, we're in a La Nina pattern. And when the water is warmer than average, we're in what's called an El Nino pattern. And again, it may seem strange that the water temperatures near South America impact hurricanes in the Atlantic Ocean, but that's really how the weather works. You know, everything around the globe is interconnected and related, and weather is a fluid. It's constantly moving, constantly changing. The earth is always moving. So as the water and the air interact with each other, it impacts weather in other parts of the world. Maybe you've heard that old saying about when a butterfly flaps his wings in Australia, it causes a hurricane in Florida, or, not to that extreme, but it's kind of that's the whole concept there. Now, another factor for the above average season is just the SSTs. Anybody know what that is?
Surface temperatures of some sort?
Yes, very good.
Sea surface.
Surface temperature, very good. Yes, so the sea surface temperatures in the ocean are warmer than average and expected to be warmer than the average. One of the key ingredients for hurricane formation, of course, is warm water. The water has to be at least 80 degrees, and then a hurricane can form. And if it's warmer than 80 degrees, that's when things really get rocking with hurricanes. Now, there are also some weaker tropical Atlantic trade winds. There's an enhanced West African monsoon, all these like big weather words. The monsoon that's in Africa actually creates those stronger easterly waves, those little areas of low pressure that come off Africa every year. And when they come off Africa and they have all that water to go across, right across the ocean, by the time they get to Florida, that allows them to develop into these really strong and long-lived hurricanes that can last 2-3 weeks sometimes. So not only does the National Hurricane Center forecast the probability of an above average season, they also put out a forecast with the number of storms. And again, you've probably seen this as well. This is the number that they believe are likely during the upcoming season. And it's a whole team of meteorologists. They really aren't. I know the running joke is that the weatherman is the one that's always paid to lie, and we always get it wrong, and I wish I could have a job where I could get it wrong all the time and still get paid. And I mean, I've heard them all, believe me. But these guys, they are meteorologists who only study hurricanes. That's all they do. They're not on TV where they also have to fix their makeup and their hair and make sure their clothes are all proper, and they don't have to worry about shooting a promotional video to say, hey, watch us tonight at 11. You won't want to miss it. All those other things. They don't do radio forecasts on the radio stations and update the website and social media and fix the computer when it's broken, and create all their graphics. And there's a lot of other things that the TV meteorologists are looking at besides just the daily forecast. These guys, these men and women, the forecasters of the Hurricane Center, this is all they do 12 months out of the year. And when it's not hurricane season, they're preparing for the next hurricane season and updating things. So, their forecast really does come from a real place. It is a guess, but it's an educated guess. It's not just throwing darts at a dartboard. So the season forecast for this year, you can see on the far right from NOAA, was issued on May 24th, and notice they put a range on it there. The range for NOAA is 14 to 21 named storms. Of those 14 to 21, 6 to 10 would become hurricanes, and of those 6 to 10, 3 to 6 would be major hurricanes. Now there's two other columns that are up there as well. The average we talked about earlier, the average fluctuates because it just goes back, from 91 to 2020. And so next year we'll have 92 to 2021. So the numbers do fluctuate. But the average number of named storms in that time frame is 14. 7 is the average number of hurricanes, and 3 is the number of major hurricanes, which is category 3 or higher. The column in the middle is from Colorado State University. I always like to include this because Dr. William Gray, who has passed away a few years ago, Dr. Gray was like the pioneer of hurricane forecasting. He was the first person to take a look at meteorological oscillations around the world and the salinity of the ocean, how much salt is where, and La Nina and El Nino. And he was the first one to take all of those things and put them together and turn it into a forecast to determine what kinds of cycles we would have with above average and below average years. So Colorado State still does these forecasts, even though Dr. Gray has passed away. Dr. Phil Klotzbach, who is his protege, Phil studied under Dr. Gray, he puts this forecast out every year. So his forecast, notice, is for 19 named storms, which is, of course, above average, 9 of which would become hurricanes, and 4 of those would be major hurricanes. Now, as storms form, you probably know they are given names. We don't name winter storms, although there is one channel out there that does, but the local news weather stations do not name winter storms. But hurricanes do get names, and it's just so we can keep them straight, right? And keep them organized and know what's what we're talking about. This is the list of storms for this year, for 2022. These names come from the World Meteorological Organization. So if you don't see your name, don't blame me. I didn't make the list. Or don't give me credit, one of the two, right? You don't want a hurricane named after you. There are 6 different lists, 2022, 2023, 2024, like each of those 6 years would have a new list, and then the list gets rotated and reused every 6 years. So this year's list was actually used back in 2016. If you've lived here for any length of time, you may recognize some of those names, because we had an Alex and a Bonnie, and a Colin and a Danielle. However, we did not have a Martin, and we did not have an Owen. The M and O storms back in 2016 were named Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Otto, and those storms were retired, and then they get replaced when the new list comes along. Another thing about the names, which is kind of interesting, is that notice the A name is a male name, and then B is female. Then next year, and it's, every other one, next year the A name storm will be a female name, and the B name storm will be a male name. So it's just to kind of, again, keep it up, keep it fair, keep it separate. And nowadays with people changing their pronouns, I don't know what they're gonna do with these names, but this is what it is for right now. That's all I know. They do skip a few letters, you probably noticed, Q and Z, the ones that's hard to come up with 6 different names. And then if the name gets retired, of course, it gets, a new name gets put on there and replaced for 6 years later. Let's see, hold on, I skipped a page. Haha, no I didn't, I have my numbers out of order. There we go. Paul mixed it up. Oh, is that what it was? We'll blame Paul.
May I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Why would they retire a name? I recognize Matthew, of course, and is it because of the severity of the storm?
Yes. The World Meteorological Organization, there's a hurricane committee underneath that organization, and they get together at the end of every season and they go through and make that decision. So yes, usually it's based on either significant death or significant monetary destruction. Something that, is a really big one. Because some of these, in past years did do a lot of damage, but the name didn't get replaced. Like Tropical Storm Faye, I don't know if you remember back in, I think we've had Faye now 3 times since I've been here, but Faye, when it originally came through in 2007, was only a tropical storm, but brought 25 inches of rain. If you guys were in Brevard County then, Brevard got hit really bad by Faye because it just sort of parked on the coast and sat there for 7 days. And so, yeah, it wasn't a big wind event, but it was inches and feet of rain. And so to me, that caused a lot of damage, but they didn't retire Faye. So I'm sure there's a threshold offhand. I don't know what it is, but I know there's a whole team that makes that decision.
Thank you.
Now, every year there is an alternate list now, too, of names. The supplemental names, just in case there are more than 21 named storms in a season. Now, we used to use the Greek alphabet. Maybe you remember that. We started doing that a few years ago. But there is anticipation that we will have more seasons now with more than 21 named storms. So instead of it just being every once in a while the Greek alphabet worked, now there'll be an additional list prepared every season just in case. So if we don't use this list, it'll just get reused 6 years from now. Now, generally, a few storms form early in the season, in June and July. We've already had a couple, the A, B, and C already this season. But the peak for us in Central Florida is actually in August and September. If you've lived here for any length of time, you probably remember Friday the 13th, August 13th, 2004. That was the day Charlie came through, and then followed quickly a few weeks later by Francis, Ivan, and Jean. So our four hurricanes in the state of Florida. This graphic shows the peak of the season, so you can kind of see there, the red color is the hurricanes and tropical storms. So we get a couple and then a little, just a few here and there, and then it really peaks on September 10th, but notice it doesn't just immediately drop off. We still have more hurricane activity generally into October, and certainly even into, the end of October and into early November. The Saffir-Simpson scale is something that is still used. There's a lot of controversy among the weather people. People are always looking for things to argue about, right? So the categories of hurricanes used to be based on wind and pressure. But then they discovered, by studying hurricanes for so long, that sometimes pressure would drop, but it didn't necessarily mean an increase in wind speed, or they wouldn't match. And so it was like, well, is it a Cat 1 or a Cat 2 or a Cat 3 or a Cat 4? Because the pressure pressure's this, but so it got very confusing. So they took the pressure out of it completely, and now the Saffir-Simpson scale is just based on wind. They measure the wind, obviously, in several different ways. There are satellites that do that. There are the Hurricane Hunter planes, and now one of the things we'll talk about in a minute is some of the unmanned like drones, equipment and products that are going to help measure the winds inside of a storm as well. So you can see 74 miles per hour, a storm goes from a tropical storm to a hurricane, a Category 1 hurricane. If it's 73 or below, it's still tropical storm. And the Category 3 is known as a major hurricane, and that's when the maximum winds reach 111 miles per hour. Again, the satellites, the Hurricane Hunter planes, the newer unmanned craft like drones, which we'll talk about in just a second. I do want to hit the watches and warnings because this is something I usually get asked a lot about, and watches and warnings are something that we use in tropical storms and hurricanes, but also in just everyday thunderstorms that we get here in the summertime. It's very confusing and it's often misunderstood, the difference between a watch and a warning. So with hurricanes and tropical storms, watches and warnings are issued in advance of an approaching storm by the National Hurricane Center. The TV stations do not issue the watches or the warnings. The watch essentially means watch out. Bing, 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 pay attention, flashing lights, something's going on. Hurricane or tropical storm conditions are possible. Not imminent, not definite, but possible in the area that they've issued the watch for, and those are issued 48 hours before the winds arrive. Now, sometimes you'll hear us on TV talking about a storm for 3 weeks out, and you're like, yeah, I knew this was coming. Right, but they won't issue the actual watch until it's 48 hours from impact. That's the time that you're finishing your home preparations, you're reviewing your family disaster plan, just kind of making sure all your ducks are in a row, if it comes here. The warning is issued when the hurricane and tropical storm conditions are expected, and that's issued within 36 hours. So by the time the warning is issued, you should already have had plenty of advance notice. Your preparation should all be complete, and your family plan in place, hopefully. Now, speaking of preparations and your family plan, let's chat about a few of the things that you should be doing now before a storm arrives. This is my list. To know your evacuation route. This is important. It's easy to say when you live inland to say, oh, I don't need to worry about that because I don't live at the coast, so I'm not going to evacuate, and that's cool. But if a Cat 5 was coming here and you did start to get nervous and think, okay, I'm going to get out of town, what road are you going to take? Find that out ahead of time. Are you going to, your sister's house in Georgia? Are you going over to Tampa? Like, where are you going? And will they change the direction of the road? Sometimes that happens, where they'll put, you can't come back into Florida. The roads are all northbound. So there's things like that happen. So as long as you know that in advance, then you feel a little bit better prepared and more comfortable if you had to leave. Of course, you want to check your insurance coverage. I'm sure you guys all know about this, but a lot of people don't know that flood insurance is not part of your hurricane plan. Your hurricane coverage, your hurricane insurance is separate from just your homeowner's policy. So you have to have a separate hurricane plan, and you need a separate flood insurance. Even if you don't live in a floodplain, if you get flooded like 20 inches of rain in Tropical Storm Faye and your house floods, but it was because of a hurricane, you don't have flood insurance. Nope, your hurricane plan doesn't cover this. You needed flood insurance. So just make sure you read all that fine print because so many people end up in trouble after the storm thinking, but I have hurricane coverage, I should be fine. So just make sure you know. Also remember that your insurance, they put a cutoff deadline on it. So when the hurricane is within so many days, if there's any insurance people in here, you can maybe help me. I think it's about 30 days. That if a hurricane's coming, you can't buy a policy. You can't wait till, 2 days before, yeah, I need some insurance real quick, we got a hurricane coming. You have to have it in advance. The supplies and the kit, this is always a tough one because it really depends on you. It depends on your family. I never like to tell people specific things to put in their hurricane kit because, if you have kids or pets or you need certain medications or, it depends. What do you like to eat? I'm not going to tell you to go buy baked beans in a can if you hate baked beans, right? Like, go get the food that you like. If you're going to be bored without your iPhone, I'm sure that would be any of you, right? That's only if your grandkids are visiting during the hurricane. Make sure you have a way to charge up your phones and charge up your electronics and all that. So yeah, the kits, there's lots of lists around that you can find of what should go in your kit, you know, the batteries and the flashlights and all that. But you just kind of need to think for yourself. The thing that we always did with my family, because you know, I worked here, but I also lived here. So I had to prepare my house, or my husband did, and kids, right? So I had to have all my stuff together for them too. So my big thing was power going out. So if my power goes out for 3 days, what do I need? And how do I need to prepare for that in advance? You know, do I need to make sure that I have a long enough extension cord to run from my refrigerator out to the generator that's in the driveway? Because I learned that one the hard way one year. 1 year, do we even have a generator? Well, no, we didn't before 2004, but boy, we got one in 2004. I haven't used it very many times since then, but you know, that's, whew, if you can just have a fan when your AC is out and your refrigerator doesn't ruin all your food, we're good, right? I just got to be able to plug in that fan because it is hot trying to sleep in 95 degrees after a hurricane and you don't have power for 3 days. Or a week, or 3 weeks, God forbid. I know we talked about some of your friends that happened to. My parents lost their power in Irma for 3 weeks in Lake County as well. So if it happens, just what would we do? Preparing your home, trimming your trees, boarding up your windows if necessary, getting gas for your generator. Those are all kinds of things. Those are like my checklist. I always make my husband go out and make sure we've got gas for the generator. And then, of course, helping your neighbors, which, of course, all of you just being here tonight is a great way to get some tips and then know each other and help out your neighbors if they need some help. And, of course, the other newbies. A lot of new people are moving to Florida all the time. How many of you, any show of hands, anybody new to Central Florida? Is this your first hurricane season? No? Oh, hey, we got one. Yeah, you do. 2 people. Okay, but look at that. So a lot of the places I go to, it's like half the room is like, we're new. But you guys were smart a long time ago, right? You're like, we're leaving the cold, snowy north and we're going south. We're already in Florida. If you've never lived through a hurricane season before, I have a few tips for you too. First, of course, all of these things are important, but there's a couple of other things I like to share that are good for the veterans too. Ask somebody who's lived through one. Ask them for advice. For those old wives' tales that people say, or things like, oh, one lady told me I freeze bags of water, like Ziploc bags of water ahead of time, and then I put bags of water in my freezer, and then it's all around my food, my meat in the freezer, and that way if the power does go out, all that ice is in there like an extra layer of cooler, and I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. There's the things about like cooking the meat ahead of time too, but I never really wanted to do that, so. Prepare early, of course, don't procrastinate. Again, you don't want to be the person standing in line at Home Depot, and we see them on the news every year waiting out to get their plywood. Also, just know that it can and it has hit here. Usually people will say, it's not going to come here, it never comes here, we live too far inland, we're fine. Well, Irma in 2017 came right up the middle of the state, and yes, weakened by the time it got to Central Florida, but still, 100-mile-per-hour winds in West Orange County, west side of Orlando, isn't really that far from, say, Leesburg or Lake County. So there was a lot of damage from Irma, from those little, just that little tiny swath. But if you're in that little tiny swath, it's like a tornado. Your neighbor's house might be fine, but if the tornado hits your house, then that's the problem. So just know that it can. So just being prepared takes all the freak-outness out of it, and you can just feel more comfortable and relaxed. Remember, no 2 storms are the same. Again, Tropical Storm Faye, Hurricane Andrew. I lived through Andrew. I lived in New Orleans in Katrina. But every storm is different. Oh, this one's moving up just like Irma did, and we were fine. This one's just like Matthew, but it curved at the last second. No 2 storms are the same. So they all are very different, and you can't just say, since this happened with this one, it's definitely going to happen with this one. Last one is avoid saying it's only a tropical storm. That one, of course, is my famous Tropical Storm Faye story as well, because Faye was only a tropical storm, but tropical storms still have winds in them that are the same as a severe thunderstorm. The severe thunderstorm has winds at 58 miles per hour, and certainly tropical storms can be that strong, and of course can dump a whole lot of rain as well. So don't kind of brush it off like, I'll just wait till it gets to a hurricane and then I'll start worrying about it. Or not worrying, preparing for it. We don't want to worry, right? No worrying. All right, a couple of things I want to share with you. I don't know if you'll find this interesting or not. The meteorologist in me, of course, loves this kind of geeky stuff, but these are some of the new things that are being enhanced and being used used for this year. And I like to just share this, just so you know the Hurricane Center is working year-round to update and enhance their tools and products to make better forecasts. So, you know, when it comes to hurricane season, yes, the individual TV stations, you know, almost everybody in the Orlando area is an actual meteorologist. 20, 30 years ago, that wasn't the case. You know, 30 years ago, which is why we got the lovely term weather girl, because people just went on TV because they looked pretty. But now, especially in Orlando, where it's such an important weather community, weather area, almost everybody is certified in some way. Most everybody's gone to college for 4 years to study meteorology, and they've gotten various certifications from different weather organizations just to show that they know what they're talking about. So most everybody here, you're going to get that from. However, you know, the ones that claim that they're putting out their own hurricane forecast, okay, cool. But again, you really don't have the time or the knowledge unless you're really working on it all the time. So that's all I'll say on that. So a new and better product for this year. What's new for this year? A couple of cool things. These are some pictures of those uncrewed things that the uncrewed surface vehicles. They're going to take measurements during the peak of the season. There's a couple of organizations under NOAA that have come together and they put these surface vehicles together. This is the first time this season that these vehicles will coordinate with other uncrewed items like ocean gliders, small aircraft, drone systems. They've kind of been trying it out on a trial basis for a while now, but this is the time that they're all going to be talking to each other. Then, of course, the hurricane hunters go up in the planes, they measure the ocean, the atmosphere, and then the area where the two meet. And having more information just always means a better forecast, a more accurate forecast, knowing what's happening inside the storm. Another enhanced thing is, what was that movie back in the day of the computer?
Hal?
Yes, Hal. What was
Space
that movie?
Odyssey
Yes.
2001.
That's it, Space Odyssey. Every time I see this picture, that's what it makes me think of, is Hal. Two of the popular hurricane models that we use, the HWRF and the HMON, they've been added to these supercomputers that are used for forecasting. Now, the models have really shown a lot of improvement. There's hundreds of hurricane models, and a lot of times you see them on TV, and a lot of times they make no sense, and we call them spaghetti models because they look like a big pile of spaghetti sometimes. I stopped showing those models on TV after Irma because I just felt like it confused people more. Because every time I would go to an event, I would get the question, well, which model is better? Well, which one's more accurate? And it's, you know, there's no answer to that question because a model is not a forecast. A model is just an option. It's the forecaster's job to take all of the model information and put it together to tell you what their forecast is. It's the person that does the forecast, not the computer output. So it's our jobs to know what the computer output is, how they differ, what they do at different times of the year and in different size storms, and then we put that information together to then tell you what we believe the forecast is going to be. So just having better data put into the supercomputers is going to help the forecasters for hurricane season. Another product has to do with the excessive rainfall outlook. This is, you know, maybe no big deal, but it used to only go out 3 days, and now it can go out 5 days. So it's really just more about more, you know, technology, more advanced warning. It's going to show where intense rain is most probable for flooding within 25 miles of a given point. So that's a new thing for this year. And then storm surge is another thing. This is actually the deadliest and least understood hurricane-related hazard. This month, we're in July, so last month, NOAA enhanced this experimental graphic, and basically it's just new color coding. It's just to make it a little bit more clear. Now, on our East Coast here in Florida, storm surge really isn't a huge problem because of the ocean floor and the shape of the coastline, but the rest of the state is under really big risk, great risk for storm surge. In fact, in 2019, there was a study done. Florida was found to be the most vulnerable state to storm surge with 2.9 million homes at risk. So that's Gulf Coast, that's down in Miami, and that's, north side. Fort Myers is the 6th most vulnerable city for storm surge in the entire United States. And on average, a major hurricane, so a category 3 or higher, a major hurricane makes landfall somewhere along the Gulf Coast region every 2 years. That's the average. So that does include Florida, but it also includes Louisiana and Texas. So, the last slide. Understanding your risk and preparing early are obviously keys to being hurricane ready. So, I encourage you to figure out your plan. Ask those what if questions. What if I lose power for 3 days? What if my house is flooded in a hurricane? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? But just being here now, getting a little bit more information about the upcoming season is obviously a huge first step in preparing and keeping yourselves and your families safe. So, with that, I will open it up to questions. And after we do questions, I will talk more about my books. That's a side note. Oh, we have roving reporter with a microphone. I like it.
Can you comment on the likelihood of tornadoes spun off of hurricanes? My understanding is if they're going up the west coast of Florida, tornadoes are usually spun off the northeast side of the hurricane. So if we got one coming up the west coast, this area is very vulnerable to tornadoes, and I can tell you from experience it has happened.
Yes, so the tornado can spin up in any part of the hurricane, but they're most likely to be in the right front quadrant. So you're thinking, you know, your hurricane, here's our hurricane. It's this little spot right here, because the hurricane is moving, right? Spinning around, and it's spinning forward. So that corner is the one that's getting both movements. It's getting movement of the storm and the movement of the storm. See what I'm saying? So that area is usually where there's the most spin and the most intense wind, and that's where you're going to generally get the tornado spinning up. Those outer rain bands too, just depending on, you know, how fast they're spinning around a hurricane, you may have a skinny little rain band way out from the center of a storm, and that will spin up tornadoes as well. And that's the thing that you can't, you know, you can't predict it very quickly. A lot of times you can't even see them because they're all wrapped in rain and they're all wrapped up in the clouds of the tornado. And if it's at night, of course, it's difficult to see. So, and they happen very quickly. So usually, I mean, man, in Irma we had what, 7 tornado warnings at once, and they were just like, they were issued and they were in place for 10 minutes and then gone. So it was one of those things where it's just like, the whole state needs to be under a tornado warning, you know, just stay inside, wait for it to pass, because you just don't know where those little tornadoes are going to spin up.
I often hear forecasters say, oh, there's a wave coming off the west coast of Africa. Could you translate that to English, please?
Yes, it's not this princess wave, and it's not this water waves. The wave is an area of low pressure before it becomes an area of low pressure. So it's really just the meteorological terms of, first it's a wave, then it's an area of low pressure, then it's a surface low. At one point it might just be a disturbance. So there's a level of organization. So a wave is truly just this area of low pressure that because the warm desert air meets up with the ocean air, the warm ocean, so you've got the two temperatures coming together, it flares up just a little blip, and then that, as it continues to travel, will start to spin, get more organized, get more energy. It's over the water, the ocean carries it, the air above carries it, the ocean carries it, and so then it turns into an area of low pressure, and then eventually can be a tropical depression, tropical storm, hurricane. Anything else?
Right here.
Hello.
Oh, we got some in the back.
Oh, okay.
Okay, just Gerald. Are we, hurricanes always counterclockwise or?
In the northern hemisphere, and for us, they are. In the southern hemisphere, I don't know if you've ever heard this or if you remember this from science class back in like 4th grade or whatever, but even our toilets flush counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere, and then they flush, if you go to South America, they flush the other way. Same thing with hurricanes. But also, so northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere are different, and then the hurricanes do happen in other parts of the world too. They don't just happen in the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, but usually they have different names.
You know, so they're like a typhoon somewhere and by the Philippines, and that, you know, they call them different things, but they're essentially the same big storms that need wind and water to form.
I did.
I just put it by your mouth.
Okay,
There you go.
okay, all right. I've heard that tornadoes, which I'm familiar with, I grew up in Texas, and hurricanes are different, but hurricanes, you have more warning,
Usually,
usually,
yes.
yes. And tornadoes, you don't. I mean,
Right.
you just don't. So if you're having a hurricane, you can have a tornado spin off of it.
Yes, you can
Okay.
have both together, yes.
Okay. But if you've already evacuated, then it's not an issue.
Right,
Right, okay. Got it.
makes sense?
I have a question. So Amy, I have a question. Okay, so we're talking about the front right quadrant for the tornadoes to spin off. And the gentleman had asked, or had kind of indicated coming up the west coast, basically, that can happen no matter which direction the hurricane would be coming from. If it were to come from the east and it's south of us, we're in the front right quadrant.
Right,
If it's north of us and headed towards the east, in other words, it came in like we've seen several recently where it makes that turn inland, anybody that's to the right front quadrant of one headed towards, let's say, Daytona Beach from, I don't know, whatever's Sarasota or whatever's north of Tampa, we would be still in that front right quadrant.
exactly.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of make
Yes.
clarification, so you don't think it's only if we got a hurricane coming up the west coast that we gotta be worried.
Right,
It's no matter which direction it's coming from, depending upon how far north or south, you gotta be worried about that quadrant.
yeah, the other thing to keep in mind too is, you know, when you look on a map and you see that Florida's this big, but the hurricane is this big, which is what
Yeah.
happened in Irma. So it kind of didn't really, it was all about, oh, where's Irma gonna go? Which center? Is it gonna go on this side or in the middle of the state or this side? It kind of didn't really matter. The point was you needed to prepare anywhere you live in Florida because that storm was this big. So whether the center was over here or over here, yeah, it's gonna make some subtle changes, but you still have to be prepared for the wind and the rain and the possible tornadoes because it's a big storm. Broad.
Crickets, crickets.
Gonna bring you the mic. Oh, we have two microphones. I feel like Dr. Phil. Or Phil Donahue, maybe.
When you're talking about the models, and they show you the European and the GFS, and sometimes they're so different.
Right.
And if they're using basically the same information, how do they get so different?
They're not. And that's the problem with the models and showing them on TV. They're not using the same information. Yes, they're gathering the temperature and the humidity and the wind and, you know, all the weather things that are happening. It's gathering all the weather information, but the different models use different math equations. They use different computer language. And so again, you may have a model that with all the things that go into it, it works really well with a developing hurricane, but if you ran that same model on like a Cat 5, it wouldn't know what was going on. Then there's models that can be run that are like early in the season, and they work really well for those, but if you tried to run one in October or November, it would do terrible. And so those are the kinds of things that you learn in college, and you know, you can read up on it, of course, on the internet now. You can find anything about all the different models, all the things that go into them, how they work, and they're used for different things. So that's really, again, that's why it's the meteorologist's job. It's the person's job to take all that information and make the forecast. We shouldn't be showing, again, personal opinion, every TV person in town shows them because their bosses want them to. And they figure if they don't show them and you want to see them, then you'll go to another channel if they're not showing them. So I just felt like, again, it was confusing to people because the model is not the forecast, and you're right. In Irma, we were showing
you know, here's the Euro and here's the GFS. Well, which is the American model. So with these two models, which again, there's 100 models, but we're only showing these two on TV right now. And this one's showing this, and then the next run of the model, the computer model, 6 hours later flips over here, and then this one flipped back here, and then this one fluctuated. And it was just so, it just sent this message that, well, nobody knows anything that's going on. But that's what models do every day, every time they're run. That's the way they work. They fluctuate back and forth because every time, you know, every couple of hours, they're ingesting all that new information. So to me, and you know, if you're trained with the models, then you know, okay, that's normal. So I start looking for trends. I start looking for models that match up. I start looking at the models that I know are doing well so far this year. I'm going to throw out the Canadian 9 times out of 10 because that's a great model for blizzards. Not so good with hurricanes. Great. Just, you know, think about it. Nobody. It's a great model for blizzards. That's great. But, you know, so they all serve their purpose. And, yeah, so that's my 2 cents. Over here.
And if you're on 27 and 441, example, if you're familiar with the area here, it is pouring. Tons of rain, tons of rain. You drive south here on 27, you get out by Legacy, and it seems dry as a bone.
And your grass is super brown, isn't it? And you're just like, please, rain at my house.
Now, there's a friend of ours, my wife and I, that grew up in Leesburg, and he claims
But there's a
that
bubble.
Lake Harris protects us over here, so the storms aren't as severe and maybe the rain doesn't make it as far over. Is there any truth to that possibly?
Well, there are microclimates where, you know, if you have little hills, if you have big mountains, if you have a big ocean, if you have even Lake Okeechobee, Lake Apopka, some of these places, yes, I do believe that there are little quirky things that can happen and change because of that. Most of the time, and it would have to be a case-by-case basis for me to say yes or no, because I'd have to be looking at that particular storm, that particular day, and say, okay, yes, this is going on, or something else. 9 times out of 10, that's not the case. 9 times out of 10, it's just the storm rained out, and it just didn't get you. And people have short memories, you know. I'll be like, man, it has not been this hot in Florida. This has been like the hottest June ever. And then you go back and look at the records and you're like, oh, it was hotter than this 2 years ago. I just forgot, you know? So I think that happens too, even to me. Like it all starts to run together and all the hurricanes run together and you forget that, oh yeah, a couple years ago I did get a lot of rain and now this year it just happens to be the storms are missing my house. So you're not alone in asking that question. A lot of people ask that question. A lot of people do believe there's something about where I live that the rain goes all around me or the rain just hits my house and nobody else. So you're not alone in asking that, but again, it's hard to just put a blanket statement on it if it's not like a really big thing, like you live right on the ocean or you live right next to Lake Apopka or like some really big thing. I do think all the lakes in Lake County, you know, Eustis, Mount Dora, Sorrento, all that water there, I do think that plays into things, especially the temperatures, and it has a big, with the wind direction. So at certain times of year, you know, if the wind is coming out of the north and the sensor for Leesburg is, you know, north or south of the water, it does have an impact where Leesburg can be 5 or 7 degrees warmer or colder than a place very close to it.
That same feeling is also extrapolated to hurricanes. Hurricanes will never hit Leesburg.
Because it's too far inland.
Yeah, for whatever reason, we got a magic
Yeah.
potion that was sprinkled on us and we're never going to get hit. You get a big storm, it's going to hit a lot of people.
And that's why you prepare for the worst, but rejoice when it doesn't happen, right? That's what I always did. Yes.
How big does the jet stream have on an impact of the path of the hurricane or the intensity of the hurricane?
Yes, yes.
Or does it, and how does it?
Yes, very much so. And not just the, you know, intensity of the jet stream, but the location of it too. Because the location of the jet stream, which is a band of wind in the upper part of the atmosphere. You've probably noticed it on flights. when you fly to California, it takes you forever to get out there, and then when you come home, it's like an hour less. Because the jet stream helps your plane move a little faster. The pilot can get caught up in that wind and be carried. So, so some benefits, but also some not benefits. One of the things about El Nino, the reason that we love El Nino years for hurricane season is because the strong jet stream rips apart hurricanes and won't let, or the strong upper level winds, not necessarily the jet stream out of the ocean, but the strong upper level winds help rip apart the hurricanes so they can't form and get tall, and they just kind of, make them fall apart quickly. But the El Nino at the same time, El Nino for us in Florida in the winter time, sends the jet stream down lower, right over Florida, so every time a cold front comes through, we get severe weather. You know how we have these beautiful winters and we never have storms? Well, every so many years, we get a severe thunderstorm on Christmas Day. I remember because I got called into work that day. It was many years ago, but still, so as the jet stream, it can impact even just giving storms extra oomph, or it can help rip them apart depending on the location and the different winds. Anything else? Yes?
Yes, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, what do you feel is a trend in the way weather takes place? Like, you've heard possibly people saying there's like a 7-year cycle to weather up north, especially if you're a skier, you find that to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that down here, that there is a cycle besides the El Nino and El Nino?
Yes, I do. And I feel like that's one of the advantages to have, forecast here for 20 years, as I got to see the cycles a few times over again. That's how I knew that when we had an El Nino winter, I was going to get called into work an awful lot because when those cold fronts come through. So yes, I do believe that. I think everything happens in cycles. Everything in nature, everything in the, with the sun, the different sunspots and sunstorms, those are in cycles. So I do think that same thing happens for us here with cold weather. We don't have a freeze every single winter, but every so many winters we might have several in a row, a couple winters in a row where it's really bad. When you look at the hurricane data that Dr. Gray did back from, I don't know if he started in the 50s maybe even before that. I think it was 90 when he died. If you look at it almost looked like the stock market, where you would see this when you're looking at hurricane formation, number of hurricanes. But it was all going up, but some years were lower than others. Sorry, I have to cough, sorry. I tried to fight it. So yes, I don't know if that answered your question, but yes. I do think that a lot of things happen in cycles. Jeanette, I know what you're doing, and I'm thanking you right now.
I apologize, I meant to bring it, and I got so excited about having dinner with you, I didn't do it.
You're not going to wait far away though, right? No, it's right there.
Couple more.
I said maybe we
Of course, it's what happens when you talk too much, right? It's my cue to stop talking. Anything else? Nobody's going to ask me where I bought my clothes or who did my makeup. I usually answer that instead of just talk about hurricanes.
I was wondering, I used to work.
Closer to your mouth, please.
Oh, it might not be on.
I used to work at CBS News many years ago in the broadcast center in New York City. What is your typical day like? I mean, you have to get up, you've got to, get the kids ready, and then how do you prepare for your broadcast?
Great question. It's different depending on which shift you have. So for the last 11 years that I was at WESH, and a few before that as well, I did the morning show. So I woke up Monday through Friday at 2 a.m. My alarm went off at 1:50, and at 2 o'clock, and at 2:05, and at 2:10. Yes. Thank you. While we're at it. So I, woke up at 2 a.m., left my house at 3. I usually did my hair and makeup and got completely ready at home because when I got to work, I had to start doing weather, and I didn't have time to do that. When the news anchors come in, sometimes they would just come in their pajamas and their hair, hair up in rollers or whatever, and then they would get ready, do their hair and makeup, and get dressed at work. But I was by myself. I was my own producer, my own weather graphics maker. There's no magic elves. There's no one there to do the forecast for you. Now, if you're Al Roker in New York, yes, you have that. But when you're in Orlando, it's not how it works. So we're all on our own, no help. So yeah, I would leave home at 3, usually get into work by 3:30, and then the newscast starts at 4:30. So for that hour, I am looking at all the maps on the computer, figuring out the forecast, writing out my forecast. And then once I have a good handle on what the forecast is going to be, especially for that day, but certainly for the next 7 days, because I have to tell a 7-day forecast. But each morning was really a focus on today. This morning when you leave the house for work, and what's it going to be like when you come home from work? Something's big coming down the road, I would talk about that, but it's really just about today. And the news started at 4:30, and I was on just about every 10 minutes from 4:30 till 9, because we did NBC, and then we also had the CW. So it was, as soon as the Today Show came on at 7 o'clock, and you would see me just once in a while, that was all taped earlier. That I had to then go over to the CW and do 2 hours of live news there every 10 minutes as well. Then at 9, it depended what happened. I was supposed to be done with my day at 11. So between 9 and 11, I would go to a morning meeting and give the newsroom a briefing about the weather so that they would know what to expect later in the day. Should we put a reporter on storm coverage? Do we need to send a reporter to do this or that? So it was always just sort of the weather picture of the day at that meeting. Lots of social media, writing an article for the website, doing the radio station updates, all of those things that need to happen. And then about 75% of the time, I would stay and do the noon newscast, which went from 12 to 1. So even when it was sunny and beautiful, most of the time I was working a 10-hour day, and it just got really old. So that was kind of part of the deal too. It wasn't that I was just waking up at 2 a.m. It was also that I was waking up at 2 a.m. and staying at work until 1:30. And if there were thunderstorms in the afternoon, then I had to wait for the afternoon guy to come in, whoever was doing the evening shift. So I couldn't leave until they got in. So sometimes I was there till 2, 2:30, maybe 3 o'clock, and then they would take over and do the night shift.
Through the years, we've heard about global warming and what its impact is on hurricanes. Is that your opinion as well? I mean, they certainly have gotten worse.
Yes. I get this question a lot. Everybody wants to know what I think about climate change, what I think about global warming. I don't usually go to this topic just because it gets people all riled up, and I'm not in the get people riled up business. Except I know you think I am because I did the weather, right? So, but that's not true. But yes, there's no doubt that we have more hurricanes now and that they're stronger. I think the question then becomes, that's the data. We know that's a fact. But the question is, do we have more hurricanes because we have better equipment? Because we have a whole lot more satellite information now than we did before. 4 or 5 of the storms last year that were called tropical storms probably never would have gotten designated. They wouldn't gotten a name 30 years ago because we didn't have the equipment and the technology to be able to even see them. So that's part of it. I also think we go back to the cycles question where everything happens in cycles. So when you're looking at the number of hurricanes, you'll have 10, 20 years of lower than average, and then you'll have 10, 20 years of above average, and then 10, 20 years, so there's all these cycles with that as well. So I think that's the big question, is just what's causing it. How much is man-made? How much is cycle? And so I just always go back to, let's just all do our part to make the world a better place. And I'm going to let other people argue about it, not me. Also, truly, climatology and meteorology are different. The meteorologist at the TV station always kind of becomes the station scientist, and if there's a volcano, we have to talk about it, or an earthquake, we have to talk about it. Well, I didn't study volcanoes or earthquakes. I didn't study climate. I had one climate class, but most of my stuff was what happened above the earth, meteorology day to day. Climatologists are looking at, hundreds of years and all this data from long, so they are very different sciences, but, they kind of get grouped in together.
Yes. Yes, have you ever heard of the the study HARP?
Yes, but remind me, it's with hurricanes?
No, it's a study where different countries have been doing this for many years now, where they actually have electric antennas set up on the ground where they're able to transmit enough power into the atmosphere to actually raise and lower the atmosphere.
Oh, for the temperatures?
Well, whatever they deem it for. I don't know what they're trying to do, but they're able to, and they've proven this, that they're able to raise and lower the atmosphere by a mile. So if
Can't
they're
speak to
able,
that.
if they're able to fluctuate, I would think that, you know, they could have some control over weather in one way or the other in different areas.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. I'd have to read up on that and study more about it
Yeah,
before I felt.
it's HARP, H-A-R-P study.
I thought you said H-A-R-K, hark,
HARP,
hark.
yes.
Anything else?
Okay, thank you very much, Amy.
You're so welcome. Thank you. As I tell my fourth graders, thank you for being good listeners. Thanks for having great questions.
Okay, you'll be around?
Yes, so I'm going to hang out back here. I do have some children's weather books that I have written over the years with at my time at WESH. The last time I was here, I only had one book, and now I have four. So the two books for reading, one is It Never Ever Snows in Florida, and yes, I know what you're thinking. Oh, yes, it does. We know. It's in the book, I promise. That is a paperback book. It is for pre-K through second grade, and it's all about a little boy who was born in Florida. It's a fiction story. He's never seen snow. He's not very happy about it, but his mom, who just happens to be a meteorologist on TV, teaches him about the weather and teaches him that just because he hasn't seen snow in Florida doesn't mean it never has. So that's a fun little story. My second book is hardcover that Miss Jeanette is holding up here. Let's Talk Weather, TV Forecasting Behind the Scenes. This one is nonfiction, and it is all about how I do my job at the TV station. So if you have young ones, that's 3rd through 5th grade is the reading level, and it's really all about cold fronts and warm fronts and how the sun heats the earth and the instruments and tools that we use. Talks a little bit about the magic of TV and the green screen that I use when I'm there. So that one. And then the other two books are workbooks. They are called Let's Talk Weather as well, activity books. Some are coloring pages, some are puzzles. They're for 2 different grade levels that follow the Florida standards for weather. So K through 2 is, you know, kindergarten through 2nd grade, and then there's a 3rd through 5th level that's for the Florida standards for what they're learning in school at those grade levels in weather and science. The books, you can get all 3 of the paperbacks on Amazon. If you have a Prime account, it's free shipping and you just pay tax. The hardcover book you can get on my website as well, amysweezey.com. And I have all of the books with me today. If anyone is interested, no obligation, but if you want to stop by, I would love to sign one for you. The It Never Ever Snows in Florida is $10. The Let's Talk Weather is $15, and the activity books are $5. You can do cash, credit card, Apple Pay, Venmo, all that fancy stuff, or cash and credit card, which is what most North people do. And there's no tax or ship, or there is tax or shipping, but it's all included, so it's just a flat rate. So I like to mention that too. And I can sign it for you, of course, if you get it today.
Thank you very much.
Good.
I
Okay.
think you got one announcement.
For the block captains that have not received the orange and or green tape, please come see me. I'd like to wrap this project up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for attending. Just a reminder, next month we're having the fire department chief come in and talk about hazardous chemicals, things in the house that could be very dangerous if you mix them. So
Fire extinguishers?
Fire extinguishers also.
Yeah. Okay, that's that.
Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Amy Sweezey here. Just wanted to say hello and thank you so much to the Legacy of Leesburg, the Neighbor to Neighbor Club, who invited me out to speak about hurricane preparations and preparedness a couple of weeks ago. If you missed it, I'm so sorry that I didn't get to see you in person, but we did record the session, so you'll be able to see that information. Also, just wanted to let you know, if you are interested in any of my children's weather books, which of course make great gifts for the children in your lives, you can check them out on my website, amysweezey.com. And thanks again, Legacy of Leesburg. I had a great time.